Tonight, we drift together into a quieter world, one far removed from the noise, speed, and glow of modern life. A world where time moved more slowly, where comfort was a rare luxury, and where human endurance was woven into every hour of the day. We're settling into the early 1700s, slipping softly into colonial America, a place where survival required patience, strength, and an unshakable sense of hope. Life was harder than anything we can easily imagine now, yet it was lived with a calm acceptance, a steady rhythm, and a kind of quiet dignity. So as you settle into your own comfortable space tonight, just take a slow, heavy breath and let your body relax. Let everything around you fade away as we step into a different time, one where the world was simpler and sleepier. And so, congratulations, because you have just opened your eyes in colonial America. You awaken slowly, as if the past itself has wrapped around you like a heavy blanket. Before you even register shapes or colors, something else greets you first: the air. It carries the unmistakable scent of wood smoke, drifting lazily from yesterday's fire. Beneath it lies an earthier smell, something raw and natural, the scent of animals perhaps, or simply the smell of people living closely with the land. It is unfamiliar, yet strangely grounding. Your nose wrinkles for a moment, but then your senses begin to soften. Humans adapt quickly, especially when there is no other choice. Your body feels stiff, but alive. And in this era, being alive at all is a small miracle. Here, good health is fragile, easily lost to cold, hunger, or a simple infection. Still, the people around you are not miserable. This is the life they know, the only life they expect. They have learned to find contentment in small things, to take joy in a good harvest, a warm fire, or a rare moment of rest. Even in hardship, they have discovered their own rhythms of happiness. When you shift your weight, you feel the primitive bed beneath you. It is nothing like the soft mattresses of your own time. Instead, it is a wooden frame strung with ropes that sag under your weight, forming a familiar dip where generations have slept before you. On top lies a thin mattress stuffed with straw or dried corn husks that poke through the coarse fabric. Each little prickle reminds you that comfort is a luxury reserved for the very few. Your back aches, but here, waking up sore is as normal as the sunrise. The room is dim, lit only by the weak morning light sneaking through small glassless windows. Glass is far too expensive for ordinary families, so these windows have plain wooden shutters that keep out rain, wind, and light all at once. Some homes stretch oiled cloth over the openings, letting in a faint, blurry glow that makes the world outside look foggy and muted, like a half-remembered dream. Your stomach rumbles softly, a reassuring sign. Many colonists go to bed hungry, but hunger also means the day must begin. In this time, preparing food is an all-day task, one that begins long before the sun fully rises. Around you, the house begins to stir with quiet, familiar sounds, bare feet padding across wooden boards, the long, tired creak of timber that has held this home together for decades. Someone is already awake, almost certainly the woman of the house, whose day begins before everyone else's. Her first skillful task is coaxing life back into the fire that burned low overnight. There are no matches, no buttons to press, only coals, kindling, patience, and experience. When you finally swing your legs over the edge of the bed, the cold hits you like a small shock. Your feet meet packed earth, hard, smooth, and cold, a floor made not from boards but from the ground itself, pressed flat over years of stepping feet. It is practical and costs nothing, but it holds the night's chill like a stone. In wealthier homes, wooden floors offer a little more comfort, but for most people, cold mornings are simply a fact of life. You exhale, and your breath fades into a soft puff of steam. On winter mornings, frost often forms on the insides of windows, and water in buckets freezes solid. You're still wearing the same clothes you wore yesterday, and the day before that, not out of laziness but necessity. Most people own only one set of everyday clothing, and perhaps a nicer outfit reserved for Sundays. The fabric is rough, woven by hand, sewn by hand, and meant to endure years of hard use. It smells faintly of smoke, sweat, and work. But so does everyone else's clothing, and so you no longer notice. The scent simply blends into the background of the world, settling around you like a reminder that life here is shared. Every challenge, every labor, every breath of cold morning air. You move to the window and push open the shutter. The early sun stretches across the landscape in a gentle golden haze, softening everything it touches. The houses nearby resemble your own, small, plain, and sturdy. Some are built with a method called wattle and daub, where thin branches are woven like a basket and covered with a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung. It is simple but surprisingly strong. Everywhere you look, large tree stumps scatter across fields, silent reminders of the forests that once stood here. Clearing land takes years, sometimes decades, so the stumps simply remain, slowly rotting as families plant crops around them. Thin columns of smoke rise from chimneys across the settlement as each household reignites its fire. Fire is the center of life here. Without it, there is no warmth, no light, no cooked food, and no safe drinking water. Keeping it alive is both a responsibility and an art passed down carefully from one generation to the next. Outside, you hear the soft clucking of chickens and the deep, steady lowing of cows. Animals are not pets. They are essential sources of food, milk, and survival. Families keep them close, both for safety and convenience. Their noises blend with the early morning air, creating a gentle, rustic chorus that has greeted countless dawns before this one. Your stomach growls again, reminding you that breakfast, simple though it may be, awaits. Colonial breakfast is rarely more than mush, a thick porridge of cornmeal and water, maybe softened with milk if the cow is given enough. Sweeteners like sugar are precious, too costly for most families, but a drizzle of molasses or a spoonful of honey might be added on rare occasions. Even its warm, earthy smell feels comforting in this cold, modest home. The woman of the house moves steadily around the hearth. There is no kitchen as you know it, just a large fireplace that serves as the heart of cooking, heating, and everyday life. She hangs a heavy iron pot over the rekindled flames, the metal creaking softly. Every pot is weighty, every movement around the fire slow and intentional. Burns are common and dangerous, for this world has no modern medicine, no antibiotics, no easy remedies. Pain is treated with herbs, hope, and patience. Nearby, buckets of water wait, carried from a well or stream, each drop hauled by hand. There are no faucets, no pipes, and no indoor plumbing. Water is precious because it costs sweat and time, and so every chore, washing, cooking, cleaning, is done with mindful care. The warmth of the fire begins to spread, pushing back the morning chill, while the smell of cornmeal thickening in the pot drifts gently through the air. And in this quiet early hour, life moves slowly, calmly, a little painfully, but beautifully in its own simple way. And as you breathe in deeply, you allow yourself to settle fully into this old, distant world, where every moment unfolds softly, like a page turning in a forgotten book. Your mouth begins to water softly, not from excitement or craving, but from the simple understanding your body has learned over countless generations, that even this modest bowl of mush must carry you through an entire day of steady physical work. In colonial America, the concept of free time barely exists. From sunrise until the sun slips below the horizon, every member of the household, including children barely tall enough to reach the table, contributes to the daily struggle to survive. There is no sitting idly, no leisurely mornings, no drifting through the day. Life here is a cycle of effort, necessity, and quiet determination. While the porridge simmers over the fire, the household begins to wake and unfold around you. You hear, somewhere nearby, the rhythmic crack of wood splitting as someone chops the morning's supply of fuel. The faint creak of a door swings open, followed by the soft shuffle of feet heading out to check on the animals. Even the smallest children have chores. You might hear their sleepy murmurs as they feed chickens, gather eggs, sweep dirt floors, or fetch water from the well. Their world has no distinction between helping and working. Their labor is simply part of the fabric of everyday life, woven into the calm, inevitable rhythm of survival. As you look around the small home, you notice again how much effort it represents. Each board was hand-cut, each beam was shaped with tools that had to be sharpened constantly. Every nail was forged one by one over a blacksmith's fire. Nothing here was purchased, in a box, manufactured by machines, or delivered from far away. Nearly everything inside the house was made by the people who live here, or by neighbors who traded goods and skills like precious currency. In this world, nothing is easy, yet nothing is taken for granted. You begin to realize, and perhaps to appreciate, how much work it took for earlier generations simply to stay alive. Staying fed required planning and physical effort. Staying warm required firewood, insulation, and constant attention. Staying dry meant maintaining the roof, patching walls, and preparing for storms. Even staying healthy was a fragile hope, managed with herbs, folk knowledge, and years of practical experience. Nothing was automatic. Everything required human hands. Yet there is something quietly beautiful about this older way of life. The people around you possess a remarkable collection of skills, the kind modern people rarely experience. These colonists can construct a house from trees they cut themselves. They can preserve meat for winter, grow their own food, stitch clothing from raw wool, treat illnesses with roots and leaves, and craft tools from iron and wood. Their knowledge is lived, practical, and deeply rooted in the earth. In this world, people do not just survive. They understand how they survive. The porridge is ready now, bubbling thickly in the iron pot. The woman of the house ladles it into simple wooden bowls. Instead of plates, most families use wooden trenchers, flat boards with shallow hollows carved into them. Spoons exist, though they are plain and handmade, and forks are rare and considered a luxury. Knives are used mainly for cutting, not for eating. Much of the food is eaten with the hands or scooped up with crusts of coarse bread. The mush is plain, warm and filling, but without the richness of modern flavors. Salt is expensive, and spices are nearly unheard of unless someone in the household has traveled or traded for them. Still, when your body knows a long day of hard work lies ahead, even the simplest meal feels nourishing and comforting. As you eat, your thoughts wander to the day that awaits you. If you live on a farm, and most colonists do, your tasks depend entirely on the season. Spring brings ploughing and planting. Summer demands weeding, tending, and repairing what weather may damage. Autumn is a scramble to harvest and preserve food, storing it carefully for the cold months ahead. Winter is for mending tools, spinning thread, repairing clothing, and gathering around the fire to stay warm. Life follows the rising and setting of the sun. You go to bed when darkness arrives because candles and lamp oil are costly. You wake with the first hint of light because daylight is the only reliable helper you have. Outside, the settlement comes alive with its gentle morning chorus. You hear children tending their chores, the rhythmic thunk of an axe splitting logs, the creak of a wooden bucket being pulled up from a well, the soft, steady sound of milk hitting a wooden pail. Every sound is purposeful, every motion part of a larger pattern that keeps the community alive. Each family relies on the others, and all of them rely on the land. Survival is a constant, quiet thread that runs through life here. A poor harvest can mean hunger. A harsh winter can mean death. A simple cut can become infected, and with no antibiotics, even a small wound can turn fatal. There are no stores with shelves full of food, no hospitals with trained doctors, no safety nets to catch those who fall behind. Families and neighbors are the safety net. Community is the closest thing to medicine. And yet, despite all of this, or perhaps because of it, there is a deep satisfaction in this world. The colonists know the value of their labor, and they see the results of their efforts directly. When they eat bread, they know who planted the wheat, who ground the grain, who kneaded the dough, who built the oven. When they sit by a warm fire, they know whose hands chopped the wood and whose skill kept the flames alive. It creates a sense of connection that many modern people never feel. Your bowl is empty now, and warmth spreads through your body. The fire crackles steadily, promising comfort and the ability to cook supper later. Outside, the sun climbs higher, painting the world in pale golden light. Another day has begun, a day that will test your strength, your patience, and your endurance. But in return, it will offer a quiet kind of fulfillment, the reward of contributing to the survival of your family and your community. You step outside into the crisp morning air. Immediately, your senses are flooded with smells that feel both unfamiliar and strangely grounding. Wood smoke drifts across the yard, mingling with the earthy scent of soil, livestock, and the simple reality of a world without modern sanitation. People and animals live close together, and baths are rare luxuries reserved for special occasions, sometimes weeks or months apart. The house you've just left behind is humble, but it is the result of months of physical work. Every timber began as a tree, cut down with hand saws that needed sharpening constantly. The walls were built the old-fashioned way. First, the men raised a wooden frame, massive beams of oak or pine shaped and notched so they could be fitted together like pieces of a puzzle, secured with wooden pegs. The marks from the broad axes are still visible, little reminders of the hands that shaped them. Between those beams is the wattle and daub, the woven stick framework coated with mud, straw, animal hair, and often animal dung. The mixture is pressed and smoothed by hand. If you touch the wall, you might feel faint ridges and dips where fingers once worked the clay mixture into place. Some walls even hold the faint impression of a handprint from long ago, captured forever in the dried earth. Above you, the thatched roof rises like a soft, uneven crown, made from layers of straw or reeds. It is woven and packed so tightly that rain slides off without soaking through. Constructing such a roof is a skilled craft, one that takes years of practice. And when done well, a thatched roof can last decades through storms and snow. But inside this small house, this structure built from sweat, skill and patience, live many people. Colonial homes are often just a single room, perhaps two at most. Families of 8, 10, even 12 people share the same small space. Parents, children, grandparents, and sometimes servants all sleep in the same room, share the same warmth, and hear the same nightly noises. Privacy, as you know it today, simply doesn't exist, and when nature calls, privacy vanishes even further. A short distance from the house sits a small wooden building, an outhouse or privy. It stands alone, humble and weathered, built above a deep pit dug into the ground. Inside is a simple wooden seat with a hole in it. There is no toilet paper that won't appear for many years. Instead, colonists use smooth stones, old rags or dried corn cobs. It is not comfortable, but it is practical, and practicality governs almost every decision in this world. And so, in this quiet morning light, you stand at the edge of a world that feels both foreign and familiar. A world shaped not by convenience, but by effort, patience, and the slow, steady work of human hands. Every smell, every sound, every task is part of the gentle rhythm that guides life here. A rhythm that invites your mind to slow down, to drift, to settle, and perhaps to rest. As winter settles over the colonial landscape, the world grows still, and every sound seems wrapped in a blanket of frost. In those long, cold months, even the simplest daily routines become slow and uncomfortable. Something as ordinary as walking to the outhouse means bundling yourself in layers of wool, stepping cautiously through snow that crunches underfoot, and bracing against the icy wind that cuts through the trees. The outhouse, lonely and distant from the warmth of the home, waits as a dark wooden box in the cold. Inside, the visit is brief but far from pleasant. A necessary task in a time before convenience, comfort, or the modern luxuries we take for granted. Yet even this is only part of the story, because beneath the quiet surface of colonial life lies a constant reminder of how different their world truly was. When that pit beneath the outhouse fills, someone must dig a new one and move the building entirely. It is a slow, grueling task, especially on humid summer days when the smell rises heavily in the heat, when flies gather in clouds, and when the earth itself seems to groan under the burden of fermenting waste. Nothing disappears, nothing is neutralized or cleaned by unseen systems. It simply sits, seeping into the soil, inching closer to the wells and streams that nearby families depend on for water. And so, quietly and almost inevitably, sickness spreads. In many colonial towns, contaminated water becomes one of the silent killers of daily life. Diseases like dysentery, typhoid fever, and cholera drift from home to home, carried not by armies or invaders, but by the simple mingling of waste and water. Even at the infamous winter camp of Valley Forge, Where the American army shivered under thin blankets, more soldiers died from illness than from cold or hunger. Out of all the men who perished there, nearly a quarter were taken by dysentery and typhoid, diseases born not from battle but from poor sanitation. When night falls or storms sweep in, even the short walk to the outhouse becomes unthinkable. Families then rely on chamber pots, small ceramic or metal bowls kept under beds or in corners. These humble containers serve as indoor toilets, filled quietly and emptied each morning, almost always by women or children. And where do they empty them? Often out the nearest window. A passerby in Colonial Boston or Philadelphia would listen carefully for the cry of "Gardaloo," a warning shouted just before someone tipped a chamber pot from an upper floor. Streets themselves become repositories of daily life, food scraps, broken pottery, worn-out clothing, and human waste all tossed into the same crowded pathways. When it rains, these streets blur into slow-moving streams of filth. When the sun returns, the waste dries into dust that rises on the wind and settles onto everything. Windowsills, clothing, food, and skin. The smell, thick and lingering, becomes part of the air itself, and this is true not only in poor neighborhoods but in the finest districts as well. Wealth does little to hold back the tide of odors, insects, and growing piles of refuse that define urban life. Given such conditions, one might imagine that colonists would prioritize bathing, scrubbing away dirt whenever they could, but in truth, most colonists rarely bathe at all. They are not careless, nor are they unaware of discomfort. Rather, they believe, deeply, sincerely, that immersing the body in water is risky, even dangerous. Many physicians of the area warn that bathing weakens the body or exposes it to illness. They believe that the natural layer of oils and dirt on the skin protects a person from disease. The idea that cleanliness prevents sickness is still centuries away. Daily hygiene, then, is limited. A typical colonist washes only the face and hands with a damp cloth and a small basin of water. The rest of the body might go untouched by soap or water for months, perhaps even a full year. Full baths are reserved almost exclusively for infants, and even then they are given not for cleanliness, but to strengthen the child against future illness. Religion also shapes these beliefs. Puritan leaders warn against vanity and insist that true moral cleanliness lies not in bathing, but in modesty, discipline, and orderly homes. There are also practical considerations. Every drop of water must be hauled by hand from a well or stream, and heating enough for a full bath requires enormous effort and precious firewood. For families already struggling to survive, boiling water for bathing seems a wasteful luxury one few would even consider. As a result, the scents of daily life drift through every home and gathering place. People smell of wood smoke from their fires, sweat from long hours of labor, and the natural musk of bodies rarely washed. Clothing, worn day after day, absorbs these smells, becoming soft with use and heavy with the fragrance of human life. Soap, when available at all, is made from animal fat and lye, a harsh mixture capable of burning skin and damaging fabric. It is meant for scrubbing pots or laundry, not for bathing. Hair, too, receives minimal attention. Women keep theirs covered, both for modesty and because washing it is difficult and time-consuming. Men often shave their heads and wear wigs, which can be cleaned more easily and removed when lice become unbearable. And lice are everywhere, woven into the daily existence of rich and poor alike. Even respected figures like George Washington wrote about the discomfort of lice infesting their wigs and clothing. People boil their garments, comb their hair with fine tools, and try herbal remedies, but true relief remains elusive. Over time, the smells of unwashed bodies become almost invisible. The human nose learns to ignore what is constant. Just as people living near factories no longer smell the fumes, and those in busy cities no longer notice the roar of traffic. But though the senses adapt, the consequences remain. With little sanitation and limited medical knowledge, diseases sweep through communities with alarming speed. Smallpox, measles, and influenza claim countless lives. Minor wounds become serious threats. A simple cut can lead to infection. A toothache can become lethal. Childbirth, too, is fraught with danger, as no one understands the importance of sterile conditions. Ironically, colonists live physically demanding lives. stronger in many ways than modern people. They lift, walk, farm, chop wood, and labor from dawn until dusk. Yet despite their strength, they remain vulnerable to invisible dangers that modern medicine easily prevents. Childhood is particularly perilous. Many families lose children before they can even name them, waiting months before giving an infant a proper name because survival is uncertain. Colonial graveyards are filled with tiny stones marking lives that barely began. And yet, amidst all of this hardship, colonists find ways to manage. They burn herbs to mask unpleasant odors, change their clothing more often than they wash their bodies, and scrub their homes even when they cannot scrub themselves. Their constant exposure to illness gradually strengthens their immune systems, leaving survivors surprisingly resilient. And perhaps most importantly, communities support one another. Neighbors share food, labor, and comfort during sickness or loss. Collective struggle binds people together, creating a social fabric strong enough to endure tragedy. So as you stand outside a humble colonial house and breathe in the layered sense of morning, wood smoke, damp earth, livestock, and human life, you experience a world both harsher and more intimate than anything modern society allows. It is a world where hardship is constant, where survival requires strength and cooperation, and where the quiet rhythms of daily life reveal a history far slower, deeper, and more human than the one found in books. It is a world where survival depends not on convenience or comfort, but on community, resilience, and the simple strength of one's hands. In this place, physical skill matters far more than book learning, and the slow, steady act of making it through each day becomes an accomplishment worth quiet celebration. As the sun rises higher in the sky, stretching long rays of pale gold over the fields and rooftops, the day begins to pull gently at your sleeves. The work is calling. It always is. And in this era, there are no shortcuts, no machinery to lighten your burden, and no safety net waiting below you if you falter. In colonial America, the workday begins the moment you can see your own fingers in the dimness of dawn, and it does not end until the final traces of daylight slip behind the trees. Every meal you eat, every garment you wear, every tool you use must begin as a raw material, shaped, scraped, spun, stitched, carved or grown by hand with techniques passed quietly from one generation to the next. Your empty stomach reminds you that the thin bowl of warm cornmeal mush you ate earlier was only the first whisper of a long day ahead. Centered on food, its cultivation, its protection, and the constant lingering question of whether there will be enough to face the coming winter. A good harvest means life. A poor harvest brings fear. This simple truth shapes the rhythm of every family's existence, if you live on a farm, and most colonists do. Your days revolve around the slow, perpetual turning of agricultural work. In the stillness of early morning, you can hear the animals stirring, calling softly to be fed, watered, and tended. The cow must be milked, a task usually done by the women of the household or by older children who learned the patient rhythm long before they could read. Milking is not the serene image painted in modern minds. Colonial cows are small and temperamental, shifting their weight, stamping their hooves, sometimes kicking at the bucket with sudden impatience. The woman milking sits on a low wooden stool, the wooden bucket wedged between her knees, her hands working in that gentle rhythm, squeeze, pull, while warm frothy milk streams down in steady pulses. A gallon of milk can take an hour of determined, careful work, and milk in this world without refrigeration is precious. It must be churned into butter before it spoils, a task requiring long, deliberate motions that leave the arms aching. Or it must be made into cheese, heated slowly, curdled with vinegar, pressed in cloth, and stored in cool cellars where time quietly transforms it into food that will last through winter when the cow produces little or nothing at all. Nearby, the children gather eggs from the chicken coop. These are not the gentle, soft-feathered birds familiar today, but scrappy, half-wild creatures who peck at small hands when startled. The child reaches carefully beneath warm hens, listening to the rustle of straw and feathers, collecting each fragile egg with the concentration of someone who understands its importance. But it is in the fields that the true weight of colonial life settles on a person's shoulders. If you are a man or an older boy, most of your day will be spent here, working soil that resists you at every step. Ploughing is done with wooden ploughs pulled by oxen or horses, the farmer walking behind, gripping the handles tightly while the blade cuts unevenly through soil filled with roots and stones. The plough jerks, sending sharp tremors through your arms. The ground, never evenly cleared, is littered with tree stumps. Silent reminders that cutting down a tree is easy compared to the impossible task of pulling up its immense roots with nothing but simple tools. Rocks rise each year from the frost, pushed up from the earth like unwelcome visitors. They must be gathered by hand and carried to the field's edge to form stone walls that stretch like quiet markers around the land. Planting, too, is done one seed at a time. Corn kernels are dropped into small holes made with a pointed stick, spaced carefully. Beans are planted between the corn rows, ready to climb the future stalks. Squash spreads across the soil at their feet, forming the ancient Native American trio known as the Three Sisters: corn, beans, and squash. Each plant feeding the other, each plant needing the others to thrive. The movements become rhythmic, steady, almost hypnotic. Yet each action requires attention. Plant too shallowly and the birds will feast, too deeply and the seeds will not sprout, too close together and the plants will strangle one another. Hours slip by with the slow cadence of labor under the warm sun, the scent of earth rising with each step. Weeding is a task that never truly ends. With a wooden hoe in hand, you chop at creeping invaders that threaten your crops. Chop, step, chop, step. An endless pattern carried across long rows beneath the burning summer sky. Harvest time, too, demands every hand. Corn is picked ear by ear, and later the kernels must be separated from the cobs. A task sometimes turned into a community event, where neighbors gather for a corn-husking bee, hands moving automatically while voices rise in gentle conversation. Grains like wheat and barley are harvested with scythes, long wooden handles with curved metal blades that glide close to the ground in precise, practiced arcs. Using a scythe is a skill learned slowly, its mastery requiring years. Done well, it sweeps through the stalks gracefully. Done poorly, it can cut a leg as easily as a stem. The grain is gathered into sheaves, loaded on carts, and threshed with wooden flails to separate the seeds. Then comes winnowing, tossing the grain into the breeze so the chaff drifts away and the heavier kernels fall back into waiting baskets. Preserving food becomes a constant, quiet battle against time. Without ice or refrigeration, meat must be smoked, salted, or dried. Vegetables are pickled, fruits are dried or stored in sweet preserves. Root vegetables rest in cool cellars under layers of straw. In the smokehouse, fires smolder for days, wrapping hanging cuts of meat in a protective veil of smoke. The temperature must be watched with care. Too hot, and the meat cooks. Too cool, and it spoils. Salted meats are packed tightly in barrels, preserved for long months when fresh food becomes scarce. While men and boys labor in the fields, the women and girls perform their own unending work. Tasks that sustain the household with quiet, patient diligence. Making clothing begins long before a needle ever touches fabric. Flax must be grown and harvested, then soaked until it softens. It is beaten, combed, and teased apart into long, pale fibers. Sheep must be sheared each spring, and their wool washed, sorted, and carded. Spinning thread demands hours at the spinning wheel, a calm, repetitive motion that shapes raw fiber into fine, workable strands. And still, the day continues, flowing onward like a long, slow river. In this world, every moment is a reminder of the fragile balance between survival and hardship, between the generosity of the land and the toil it requires. And through it all, people endure, quietly, steadily, because in this time simply lasting another day is its own quiet triumph. In the quiet dimness of an early colonial morning, when the world still seems wrapped in a soft grey haze, a woman settles before her spinning wheel. The wooden frame creaks faintly as she begins her work, drawing out loose fibers with practiced ease. Her fingers move slowly, carefully, almost dreamily, coaxing the strands into thread as thin or as strong as she needs. The wheel gives off a low, steady hum, turning and turning like a lullaby whispered by the house itself. Hour after hour she sits with her work, the soft rhythm becoming a companion to her thoughts. Sometimes she hums, sometimes she sings, letting simple melodies drift through the room to ease the monotony. A skilled spinner may create hundreds of yards of thread in a single day, but it is the kind of labor that blurs time, quieting the mind as the wheel continues its peaceful spinning. Once the thread is ready, it moves to the loom, another wooden instrument of quiet persistence. The loom stands like a patient giant, holding taut the long lines of warp threads. The weaver sits before it and begins the slow repeating dance of passing the weft back and forth. Her hands glide gently, and her feet press the treadles beneath her. The entire process becomes a soft, hypnotic rhythm, almost musical in its constancy. With each pass, the cloth grows inch by inch, as though it is slowly waking into existence. And yet, even when the weaving is done, the cloth itself is still far from finished. Wool must be fulled, washed, beaten, coaxed into a firmer, warmer texture. Linen must be laid outside beneath the open sky, bleached by weeks of sunlight and damp morning dew. Only then, after all this slow transformation, can the fabric be cut and shaped into clothing. Patterns passed down from mother to daughter guide each careful motion. Every stitch is made by hand, tiny and precise, the kind of work that demands patience and quiet concentration. A single shirt may take weeks, and every stitch must hold through years of wear, weather, and washing. The needles, made from precious metal, are cherished tools, protected, polished, and never misplaced. Cooking fills another part of the day with its own demanding rhythm. Meals are prepared over an open fire that must be watched constantly, its heat managed with steady, deliberate attention. Heavy iron pots dangle from hooks and chains, and the cook moves them nearer or farther from the flames depending on what the food requires. Bread, a staple of the home, comes from a stone oven built into the side of the hearth. The oven must first be heated by burning a fire inside. Only after the stones glow with warmth can the ashes be swept out and the loaves slid in. The heat that remains bakes the bread slowly, evenly, peacefully. Because the process is so long, baking happens only once or twice a week, with neighbors often joining together, sharing time, fire, and effort as they take turns using the precious heat. Other dishes require constant stirring, stews simmering for hours, porridges thickening over unpredictable flames, meats turning slowly on hand-cranked spits. Burns are common, and the fire is both friend and hazard, its sparks flying unpredictably. Water must be fetched again and again from wells or nearby streams, heavy buckets carried over aching shoulders. In winter, ice must be broken and melted. In summer, the heat makes the repeated trips exhausting. Even the simplest cleaning is a task unto itself, done with limited water and harsh soap that leaves hands raw and red. Laundry is a rare but grueling event, heating vast amounts of water, scrubbing, rinsing, wringing. Women gather together for this communal labor, sharing tools, stories, and strength as the day stretches long and slow. Life moves with the seasons. Summer brings endless hours of work beneath long, bright days, while winter shifts the rhythm inward, closer to the glow of the fire, spinning, weaving, repairing tools. These tasks fill the dark months, while the lighter months spill over with chores tied to fields, animals, and food preservation. Even the children play their part, beginning their chores as young as 5 or 6. Boys shadow their fathers, learning trades and tools. Girls follow their mothers, learning cooking, sewing, and the countless quiet skills needed to keep a household alive. Leisure, as the modern world knows it, scarcely exists. Rest happens only in small scraps, moments by the fire, a few quiet breaths between one necessary task and the next. The toll of such constant work settles into the body over time. Hands become calloused and stained. Backs bend from endless lifting and bending. Feet toughen from walking on rough ground. And yet, these same bodies grow strong, capable of work that seems almost magical in its endurance. By the time dusk settles and the sky darkens into deep blue, a day's work feels like an entire week compressed into hours. The clothes are sweat-soaked and dusty. The muscles throb with exhaustion, and the scent of wood smoke and honest labor clings to the skin. But there is also a quiet satisfaction, a deep, steady understanding that every hour of the day contributed to survival. Still, not everyone lives this way. Colonial America is a world sharply divided. and the rhythm of daily life changes dramatically depending on social class. If one is born among the wealthy gentry, owners of vast plantations or large estates, the morning begins in a very different manner. Instead of waking to cold air and coarse bedding, the wealthy rise in rooms with glass-paned windows and beds fitted with soft, feather-filled mattresses. Fine linen sheets, smooth and cool, replace the rough homespun of the poor. Servants, some indentured, others enslaved, help with the delicate routines of dressing. A wealthy man may wear imported fabrics, carefully tailored garments, and polished buckles of silver. A wealthy woman dresses in layers of linen, petticoats, and stays made with whalebone, her silhouette shaped to the fashion of the time. Their clothing comes in colors the poor can scarcely dream of. Deep indigos, brilliant reds, rich blacks. Many among the upper class even wear wigs crafted from human hair, powdered and styled at great expense. Maintaining these wigs requires professional care, and a single one might cost more than what an entire family earns in a year. Even breakfast in a wealthy household feels like another world. Tea from China, coffee sweetened with precious imported sugar, soft wheat bread, fresh butter, and preserved fruits. These luxuries place the upper class in a realm almost untouched by the relentless labor of ordinary colonists. Their days flow with comforts made possible only by the unseen, exhaustive work of countless others. In the wealthier households of the colonies, daily life drifts along at a gentler pace, at least for those who hold the power. The wealthy seldom concern themselves with the clatter of pots or the rising heat of the kitchen fire. Instead, their meals are prepared by servants or enslaved people who move quietly through their tasks, tending to the flames, seasoning the food, and arranging it on plates of pewter or imported china. In many grand homes, the kitchen stands apart from the main house, connected by sheltered walkways to keep the smoke, heat, and heavy smells of cooking from drifting into the living spaces. Along these covered paths, you might see servants hurrying from building to building, balancing trays of steaming food as they move through the cool morning air or soft evening dusk. Inside, the homes of the wealthy would feel almost unreal to someone from the poorer farming classes. Instead of a single crowded room, these houses spread out into many spaces, each with a purpose of its own. A parlor for receiving visitors, where polished wood shines in the candlelight. A dining room used only for meals, its long table ready for careful service. Bedrooms separated for parents and children, offering a hint of privacy unknown to most. And for the truly fortunate, a library. An entire room filled with books carried across the ocean, their pages filled with ideas from worlds far beyond the colonies. The floors beneath their feet are smooth wooden boards instead of packed earth. The walls are plastered and painted, rather than rough logs chinked with mud. Furniture is not hastily assembled but finely crafted, each piece shaped by hands trained in the delicate art of carpentry. Yet even with all this wealth, comfort is relative, and even the grandest colonial home still exists without the conveniences modern people take for granted. There is no electricity, no running water, no central heat. Fires must be tended constantly, and candles provide the only light. The finest china is still used in chilly rooms during winter, and in rooms heavy with heat during summer. Luxury softens life, but it does not remove its constant challenges. The middle class, often called the middling sort, lives in a world balanced between hardship and modest comfort. These are merchants, skilled artisans, successful farmers and professionals, such as doctors or lawyers. Their lives depend not on the brute force of field labor, but on skills learned over many years. A blacksmith, for example, steps each morning into a shop filled with intense heat radiating from the forge, a special fire designed to burn charcoal hot enough to turn iron white with heat. Just entering the space causes sweat to rise on the skin. The air trembles under the force of the flames, and the blacksmith stands at the heart of this furnace, swinging heavy hammers and shaping metal into the countless tools that keep colonial life running. The rhythm of blacksmithing becomes a kind of music, the deep breath of the bellows feeding air to the fire, the sharp ring of hammer against anvil, the sudden hiss when glowing metal is dipped into water to cool. A skilled blacksmith reads the iron by its color, the bright yellows and oranges that signal readiness, the darker shades that warn of brittleness. Timing is everything, a quiet dance played out between fire and metal. Carpenters and cabinet makers live in their own measured worlds of wood and steel. Their tools, planes, saws, chisels, adzes, require not only strength but careful precision. With these tools, a master craftsperson can shape wood so smoothly it feels almost polished by nature itself. They create joints that lock tightly without the help of nails, relying only on the grain of the wood and cleverly cut angles. These skilled workers often live above or behind their shops, their homes reflecting a life that is neither wealthy nor poor. Sturdy furniture, good but simple meals, clothing that fits well but favors practicality over ornament. Life in the colonial cities offers yet another rhythm, a steady hum of activity unknown in the quieter countryside. In places like Boston, New York, or Philadelphia, mornings begin with the toll of church bells, the rattling of wagon wheels on cobblestone streets, and the call of vendors offering their goods. Streets wind through crowded neighborhoods, narrow and often muddy, lined with buildings that stand shoulder to shoulder. The scents of cooking fires, livestock, and waste mingle heavily in the air, especially during the warm months when everything seems to press closer together. Yet the city holds conveniences that the rural colonist can only dream of. There are shops where you can buy bread instead of baking it, where you can purchase cloth instead of weaving it, where a tailor can make garments to order. Apothecaries sell medicines, herbs, and spices from faraway lands. The taverns are the beating heart of city life. They are more than places to drink. They are gathering points where news is exchanged, business is arranged, travelers find shelter, and the steady murmur of conversation blends with the smell of food and pipe smoke. Inside, you might hear laughter, arguments, or the soft scrape of a fiddle. Alcohol flows freely. Beer, cider, ale, and stronger spirits like rum. Because, in many city wells, water is far less safe to drink. Even children sip small beer, a weak brew considered safer than plain water. Education drifts unevenly across these layers of society. Wealthy children, especially boys, attend formal schools or study under private tutors who teach them languages, philosophy, and mathematics in preparation for college. Institutions like Harvard or William and Mary stand as symbols of achievement, calling the privilege toward scholarly lives. Middle-class children attend dame schools run by women who teach in their homes. The students gather in kitchens or parlors, learning basic reading, writing, and arithmetic. The classroom may be small, the lessons simple, but the opportunity is valued. Poor children, especially in rural areas, often go without formal schooling entirely. Their education comes from chores, from watching their parents, from learning the skills that survival requires. Books are rare and expensive, often limited to the family Bible. Even those who can read have little printed material to practice with, as each page must be created by hand on slow, laboring presses. Religion shapes colonial life in deep, unwavering ways. Sundays are not gentle days of rest, but long hours spent in church, sitting on hard wooden benches in unheated buildings. Ministers speak with solemn authority about sin and salvation, their sermons stretching on for hours. The congregation is expected to sit still, to listen closely, to absorb the message. Falling asleep is a public embarrassment. Yet beyond the stern rituals, church is also a social anchor. After the service, the churchyard fills with quiet conversations, news shared, marriages arranged, community decisions whispered among neighbors. Belief reaches into everyday life, encouraging hard work, patience, and acceptance of suffering. Many colonists see hardship as a test of character and a sign of divine purpose. This mindset steadies them through the long labor of their days, giving them a sense of order even in the face of constant challenges. Colonial communities also rely deeply on one another. Barn raisings gather all the local men to build an entire structure in a single day, a powerful blend of labor and camaraderie. House raisings follow the same pattern, transforming logs and timbers into homes through shared strength. Quilting bees bring women together, their needles darting in and out as conversations weave through the room like threads. The quilts they create are not only practical, they are memory woven into form, representing hours of shared stories and quietly offered support. Even corn husking becomes a social gathering, turning a tedious chore into a moment of community connection. Families gather slowly in the dim glow of lantern light, drifting into someone's barn as if guided by the quiet rhythm of the season itself. Inside, enormous piles of corn lie waiting, their dry husks rustling softly with every movement. People settle into wide, gentle circles, their hands working almost without thought, stripping away husks in an easy, familiar motion learned over many years. The barn fills with low chatter, warm laughter, and the occasional sigh of contentment. Sometimes a fiddle begins to play in the corner, and someone hums along. A small dance might start, slow and unhurried, while others carry trays of warm bread and stew to reward the workers. Harvest time has a way of pulling entire communities together, reminding everyone how deeply intertwined their lives truly are. In these quiet evenings, the rhythm of cooperation becomes almost a form of survival. When one family's crops are ready, neighbors set aside their own work without hesitation, knowing that even a delay of a few days might mean a devastating loss. The favor will be returned when their own harvest ripens. There is an understanding, a gentle, unspoken promise that no one endures the uncertainty of the land alone. And yet, beneath these shared tasks, the three great colonial regions, New England, the Middle Colonies, and the South, develop in ways so distinct that each begins to form its own culture, shaped by landscape and climate as surely as by the people themselves. New England, with its stubborn rocky soil and harsh winters, naturally turns towards small farms, steady fishing, and eventually early manufacturing. Life there is tight-knit and industrious, forged by necessity and cold winds. In contrast, the Middle Colonies, blessed with softer earth and a gentler climate, grow into the bustling breadbasket of colonial America, their golden fields stretching across the land. Farther south, where the warmth lingers long into the year and the soil grows thick and rich, enormous plantations rise. Tobacco, rice, and other cash crops dominate life there, sweeping people into a system built on expansive fields and relentless labor. Each region develops its own patterns, its own foods, houses, rhythms of work, and a New England fishing village feels like an entirely different world from a Virginia tobacco plantation or a Pennsylvania grain farm. And yet, despite these differences, all colonists face the same vast wilderness that surrounds them, pressing in on every side. Evening settles over the colonies much the same way everywhere, as a slow dimming of the sky, a hush that falls over fields and forests, and families gathering around fires. In this early world where birth largely shapes a person's future, the distinctions between rich and poor soften in the flickering firelight. Everyone depends on fire for warmth and light. Everyone fears sudden illness or accidents that can end a life without warning. Everyone knows their survival rests not just in their own hands, but also in the support of the community around them. By night, when families sit close to the hearth, those harsh social lines drawn during the day seem to blur, replaced by the more basic needs for warmth, safety, and companionship. As winter approaches, its presence creeping quietly into the air, the realities of colonial life sharpen. The cold months reveal just how delicate survival can be, when a simple fever may become deadly, and when the daily struggle to stay warm becomes exhausting. These are the months that test communities, whether they come together or fracture beneath the weight of hardship. The first bite of frost in the morning air signals that the season of preparation has fully arrived, and every family feels the urgency settling in their bones. Food preservation becomes not just important, but essential. The last garden vegetables must be gathered quickly before frost steals them away. Root vegetables, turnips, carrots, potatoes, are gently pulled from the earth and carried into cool, quiet, underground cellars carved into hillsides or dug beneath homes. These spaces, lined with stone and protected beneath layers of earth and straw, keep food from spoiling without letting it freeze. Their stillness holds the calm promise of nourishment during the long, silent months ahead. Then comes the apple harvest, a time of both celebration and demanding labor. Apples, one of the rare fruits that can last through winter, must be handled carefully. Some are eaten fresh, crisp and sweet. Others are sliced thin and laid out to dry before being stored in cloth bags. Many more are carried to wooden presses, where several people work together to crush them into cider. At first, the juice runs golden and mild, but without refrigeration, nature takes over. The yeasts on the apple skins slowly transform the liquid, turning it into alcoholic cider over the course of weeks. This change is not a mistake, it is preservation. Alcoholic cider lasts longer than juice and is often safer to drink than water, which may be contaminated. Entire families drink cider daily, even children, though theirs is watered down, because it is reliable, comforting, and stable. Yet even with all these preparations, a shadow lingers over winter. The danger of illness grows whenever people crowd into small, poorly ventilated homes. A single cough can sweep through a household in days. Medicine, as understood by the colonists, sits somewhere between tradition, guesswork, and belief. Families rely on remedies handed down through generations. Willow bark teas for pain, bread and milk poultices for infections, honey mixed with whiskey for coughs. Some of these treatments truly help, others do nothing at all. Trained doctors, when they can be found, often work from theories that now seem strange. Ideas about the four humours, insisting that sickness results from imbalances between blood, phlegm, and two kinds of bile. And so winter comes, a slow, inevitable arrival. It wraps itself around the colony, pressing families into their homes, into their communities, and into the season of waiting. Despite the harshness, there is something quietly resilient in the way people endure. With firelight flickering against the walls and snow whispering outside, the colonists settle into the long, cold months, holding close the knowledge that survival depends on preparation, cooperation, and the quiet strength of each other. Treatments in the colonial world often drift toward methods that seem strange to us now. Attempts to rebalance the body's humours through bloodletting, purging, and other rituals that frequently leave patients weaker than before. A doctor, believing illness came from having too much blood, might open a vein and let it flow into a waiting bowl. The steady drip of life, draining away in the dim light, was seen as healing. Sharp steel lancets made quick cuts, and even those already pale with fever might lose pints of blood in the process. Many patients who might have recovered with rest instead slipped further into illness, their strength draining long before the fever did. Purging was no gentler. Strong laxatives or bitter substances that forced vomiting were given in the name of cleansing the body. Families watched helplessly as loved ones grew dehydrated and exhausted, their bodies working far harder to survive the treatment than the sickness itself. Even the simplest health problems could turn into ordeals. When a tooth ached beyond endurance, and it often did in an age with almost no dental care, a patient would seek help from whoever had the proper tools and the courage to use them. A barber, a blacksmith, a neighbour with strong hands. Any of them might serve as an impromptu dentist. There was no anesthesia, no gentle numbing, only perhaps a swallow of alcohol or a pinch of opium if the family could afford such luxury. The patient sat in a chair gripping its wooden arms while metal pliers closed around the painful tooth. More often than not, the tooth broke, leaving fragments buried in the jaw that would fester in the weeks to come. Even great men suffered. George Washington endured lifelong dental agony, relying on dentures crafted from ivory, metal, and human and animal teeth, heavy, uncomfortable, and far from natural. If this was the best care the wealthiest man in America could receive, one can imagine what ordinary colonists endured: years of quiet suffering, missing teeth, chronic infections, and the struggle to eat enough to stay healthy. The dangers of infection extended far beyond dentistry. A tiny cut, just a scrape from a kitchen knife or a splinter from a fence, could turn deadly. Without knowledge of germs or proper sterilization, infections spread quickly, silently, and often fatally. A broken bone that pierced the skin usually spelled disaster. Childbirth, too, was fraught with risk. Women entered labor knowing that both they and their babies faced real danger. Midwives, skilled through long experience rather than formal training, did their best with the knowledge they had. They tended to mothers with steady hands and calming words. yet unknowingly carried infection from one birth to the next, reusing tools and linens without cleaning them. It was no one's fault. It was simply the reality of a world without modern medicine. Infant mortality remained heartbreakingly high. Families often lost half their children before adulthood. Many parents waited months before giving a baby its name, clinging to a fragile hope that this child might survive. In old colonial cemeteries, rows of tiny headstones tell the silent story of children whose lives flickered briefly and were gone. Living under these constant threats shaped a deeply fatalistic culture. People leaned heavily into faith, believing that life and death rested in God's hands and that suffering had divine purpose. Religious comfort softened the edges of grief, helping families endure losses that would shatter modern households. The death of children, the passing of young spouses, the daily shadow of pain. These sorrows were woven into the fabric of colonial life. Yet even within this world of hardship, people created spaces for joy, for rest, and for the sweet warmth of community. Winter evenings became a gift of their own. With daylight fading early, chores ended sooner, leaving long hours to fill beside the hearth. Families gathered around the crackling fire, its warmth circling them like a protective embrace. Storytelling flourished during these quiet nights, the flickering flames casting soft, shifting shadows that made every tale feel alive. Some stories traveled across the ocean from Europe, carried in memory for generations. Others told of local characters, small adventures, or familiar mischiefs. And then there were the religious stories, comforting, moral, and deeply embedded in the rhythm of colonial faith. The storyteller's voice would rise and fall slowly, matching the easy glow of the fire, drawing listeners deeper into the soothing world of spoken tradition. Music also filled these evenings, simple but treasured. A handmade fiddle might lead a small dance during community gatherings. A wooden flute carved from maple produced soft, airy melodies. A drum fashioned from a hollowed log and stretched animal skin offered steady rhythms. But most music came from voices, family members singing together as naturally as they breathed. Hymns, work songs, ballads of old sorrows and new hopes drifted through homes and barns alike. Singing accompanied nearly every task, women spinning thread, men chopping wood, children helping with chores. It softened work into something communal, something shared. Children played with whatever materials the land offered. A carved piece of wood became a doll. Smooth stones turned into a simple game. A loop of string became a whirligig, buzzing happily between small fingers. Boys rolled wooden hoops along the ground with sticks or carved whistles from thin willow branches. Girls practiced the domestic skills they would need later in life, playing with miniature spinning wheels, tiny looms, and little cooking pots. Their games were more than entertainment. They were gentle lessons, shaping the adults they would one day become. Seasonal celebrations punctuated the long cycle of work and worry. Harvest festivals, full of gratitude and relief, brought communities together to share roasted meats, fresh bread, preserved fruits, and the all-important cider that warmed bellies on cold nights. Winter holidays existed too, though far quieter than today. Christmas, especially in Puritan communities, centered on prayer and reflection rather than gifts or festive displays. For them, the holiday's meaning was solemn, simple, and deeply spiritual. And so, even in a world filled with constant uncertainty, colonial life found its balance. Hardship and joy lived side by side. Communities worked, celebrated, grieved, and endured together. As winter deepened, families wrapped themselves in shared warmth, stories, and song, creating the gentle moments of peace that made survival not just possible, but meaningful. As the year moves quietly through its familiar cycle, the colonial communities find themselves embracing each season with traditions that feel as old as the land itself. During the colder months, when the nights stretch long and the air settles into a deep, patient stillness, families gather to mark the season in their own simple ways. There are no grand displays or elaborate festivities. Instead, the homes glow softly with decorations made from evergreen branches, their scent filling the rooms with a reminder that life continues even in the frozen quiet. Special foods are prepared from whatever can still be found: dried fruits, stored grains, and the last lingering roots from the autumn harvest. Small handmade gifts are exchanged, crafted slowly by gentle lamplight, each one carrying more sentiment than value. It is a season not of excitement, but of warmth, reflection, and quiet companionship. Then, almost without warning, spring begins to stir. It arrives not with a shout, but with a whisper, as if careful not to break the tender calm that winter encouraged. The first green shoots pushing through the thawing soil become cause for genuine joy, a relief after months spent relying on preserved foods and familiar routines. The return of migratory birds brings a new sound to the morning air, soft and hopeful. Fruit trees begin to bud, and the warming earth signals that the long cycle of renewal has begun once more. For the colonists, each sign of spring is more than a simple change of weather. It is a reminder that survival leads eventually to renewal. Even as they adapt to this steady rhythm of hardship and recovery, a quiet awareness builds beneath the surface, a sense that larger forces are slowly shaping a future they cannot yet see. Across the ocean, tensions between the American colonies and Great Britain grow heavier with every passing year. Debates over taxation, representation, and control drift into everyday conversations, unsettling the peace of daily life. The British government, burdened by the costs of wars fought partly to defend its American territories, turns to new taxes to recover its losses. The Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Townsend Acts. Each measure lands like a small yet persistent weight on the colonists' shoulders. They find themselves paying taxes on molasses, on simple pieces of paper, even on the tea they drink to warm themselves through cold evenings. And because they have no voice in Parliament, they feel their frustration echo in the now famous cry of no taxation without representation. These laws reach deeply into the livelihoods of ordinary people. Colonial merchants feel their businesses falter under heavy restrictions. Skilled craftsmen, those who know their trades with decades of practice, find their work stifled. A blacksmith who could easily make strong, dependable nails for his community is ordered instead to purchase costly, imported nails. A furniture maker, capable of shaping beautiful pieces from local wood, sees his craftsmanship undervalued and overshadowed by goods favoured by British policy. These pressures, combined with a growing sense of shared identity, begin to change the way colonists see themselves. Generations born on American soil no longer feel entirely British. They think of themselves as something new, Americans shaped by their own labour, land, hardship, and hope. By the time the Boston Tea Party takes place in 1773, years of resentment have quietly accumulated like winter snow on rooftops. The decision to grant the East India Company a monopoly on tea sales threatens the very merchants who have sustained their communities. So, one cold night, colonists take dramatic action, boarding ships and sending hundreds of chests of valuable tea into the dark waters of Boston Harbor. The British response is swift and severe, closing the harbor, revoking Massachusetts' charter, and allowing British officials to escape local justice by being tried back in England. These measures convince many colonists that fair treatment under British rule may no longer be possible. As tensions rise, daily life begins to shift in subtle but undeniable ways. Women lead boycotts of British goods, refusing imported tea, cloth, and anything that ties them to an economy they no longer trust. They spin more thread, weave more cloth, and revive domestic production with determined patience. Men gather on village greens, forming militia units, practicing basic military drills, and pledging to be ready within a minute's notice. These Minutemen are not soldiers by profession. They are farmers, merchants, carpenters, and craftsmen. Their lives have already taught them resilience, self-reliance, and the value of cooperation. These skills, forged through years of surviving harsh winters and unpredictable harvests, quietly prepare them for the struggle ahead. When the revolution finally arrives, it brings new hardships but also a profound sense of purpose. The soldiers who endure the bitter winter at Valley Forge are men accustomed to cold, hunger, and discomfort. The women who support the war effort already know how to run households without imported goods, how to weave thick cloth, how to stretch every resource. The same qualities that shaped colonial survival now become the foundation of a fight for independence. And so, as you imagine yourself drifting to sleep in a colonial bed, wrapped in simple quilts, listening to the distant quiet of a village settling into night, you lie at the edge of profound change. The world around you, built by necessity and sustained by cooperation, is preparing to transform. The handmade goods, the community bonds, the slow, season-shaped rhythms of daily life. All of these have formed a character that will not disappear with independence. Instead, they become part of something larger, the American spirit of self-reliance, hard work, and belief in the power of ordinary people. The people sleeping around you tonight have already achieved something extraordinary. They have carved homes out of wilderness, created communities in unfamiliar land, and proven that determination can build a society where opportunities grow from skill and perseverance, rather than inherited privilege. In just a few years, these same people will help create a nation grounded in radical ideas that government should serve its citizens, that ordinary people can guide their own futures, and that liberty and community can exist side by side. The daily rhythms of colonial life, the cooperation required for survival, the mistrust of distant authority, the quiet triumphs of ordinary labor, have quietly prepared them for a revolution none could fully foresee. And so, as your eyes grow heavy and the soft night of the colonial world settles around you, you can imagine yourself drifting into sleep among people who are unknowingly shaping the future. Their simple acts of living, working the land, caring for neighbors, enduring hardship, were building towards something far greater than themselves. Morning will come gently, bringing with it another day of work, challenges, and quiet victories. And in time, all those mornings will build a new nation, slowly, patiently, upon the foundation of everything these colonial Americans learned about resilience, community, and the quiet dignity of everyday life.